That's what so many of these truths are about how do you create separation from the pack. Notice I'm not saying go find your sound or anything like, no, that feels a little too artistically heavy. You know what I mean? But instead, how can we distance ourselves from the competition? How can we create a sense of uniqueness in an industry which isn't necessarily looking for originality? What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Qs podcast, where we talk about all things production, library, and sync music every single week. It is so good to be with you today. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio in your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for spending part of your day here with me. And as always, a special word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers of 52 Qs who really do keep all of this going. If you want to learn more about how you can support 52 Qs, and be sure to stick around because I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, our topic this week is we're going to be talking about 5 more inconvenient truths. Now, back in 2022, I unpacked 5 things that we need to kind of get right with if we want to be a professional production music composer. And so that was in 2022, but I think it's time to talk a little bit more. And so you definitely want to stick around for that. But first, last week we didn't have our normal podcast. Instead, we had a very special live episode where we listened to all of the submissions in our composer quest. And the quest was show us your superpower. What's your superpower? And I'm happy to announce that our winner is Nathan Toft. His submission, which was called Suspicion Commission, won first prize. And he's going to be joining me on the podcast. We're going to talk about his process. We're going to talk about his superpower. We're going to take a listen once again to Suspicion Commission. Second place was Corey Levine with From Lost to Found, and Michael and Yuka Reschke with Overflow. So again, Nathan's going to be joining me on the podcast. I'm going to be interviewing him. Really looking forward to chatting with him. And Corey and the Reschkes are also going to win a free feedback video. So thank you everybody for joining us on the Composer Quest. We've got the next Composer Quest coming up right around the corner, and I'll go ahead and give you a hint. Christmas in July, with some really interesting prizes lined up. So if you're interested in joining that Composer Quest, then head over to 52qs.com. Make sure to register for the community and make sure to join us over in the Composer Quest space. Now, how has my week been? Especially coming off of a week where we did our live thing, and what I found myself this week doing, and you might even notice the background shots a little bit different. Well, two things are different. First of all, I moved my drum set from, kind of the right side of the room to the left side of the room, but I also swapped out drum sets, right? So this is my baby. This is my nice drum set. This is the drum set that was actually crowdfunded because, wow, it's been probably 8 or 9 years ago. My drum set was stolen out of my car. And we're talking about cymbals that I had, a cymbal collection that I curated for like some 15 years, Constantinople rides and all this kind of stuff. And so it was stolen out of my car, but I had like a gig in just a couple of weeks. And so Shannon, unbeknownst to me, set up a crowdfundme and a GoFundMe rather. And this drum set was the universe responding to what was pretty traumatic for me. Now, I know in the grand scheme of things, getting an instrument stolen out of a car, pales in comparison to maybe others' trauma. But for me, I just remember kind of crumpling onto the floor, thinking it's all gone. I didn't know how I was gonna was going to make a living. I didn't know how I was going to do these gigs. There were jazz gigs and all this stuff. So Shannon, man, yep, I definitely married up. And the generosity of people who knew me through the Drummer Talk podcast, people who knew me as a teacher from Memphis to North Carolina to here in Florida. And it was so amazing that I was able to not only replace a drum set, but upgrade a drum set. And so this is it. It's a DW kit. I've always wanted a natural colored DW drum set, even as a middle school and high schooler, like DW was the top of the line. And we can argue about, does it deserve it and all that stuff. But for me, that's the Desert Island kit. And I love that kit. I love it so much. It was my professional gigging kit. And when I retired from professional gigging, just this year, and when I say I retired, I have kind of officially retired because there are a couple of threads, some music directors who would reach out to me, and I would say yes to them. And just last week, I turned down what is like the last gig. I'm like, I've kind of stepped back from this, focusing on the community, focusing on teaching, and focusing on being a composer. So what that means is I had this professional universe supplied drum set, which was literally in cases in a spare room just right downstairs. And I thought, you know what, man, it's time to bring that in. And I left it in cases because if I have a gig, the last thing I want to do is like tear down equipment, pack it up, and then go play the gig, come home and unpack it. So, I had kind of a practice kit, and that's what was over here, over my right shoulder here, kind of a practice kit. It was a kit I bought like in late 90s. And so it was great. It was good, kind of tuned up, jazzy, little 18-inch kick and everything. And it was fine. But I wasn't gigging out with that. I was gigging out with this guy now. But now that I don't need to pack up drums, and now that I don't need to go out and play, they came into the studio. And it's going to take some getting used to seeing, a yellow drum set behind me, but I'm sure I'll find a way to work through the pain. But the reason I'm even entertaining this is I spent the better part of last week kind of tracking drums, which is crazy for me because tracking drum set is not the easiest. The drum set is not the easiest instrument to mic and record. There are so many different recording techniques. There are so many different variables that go into good drum sounds, everything from the room to the heads, to the tuning, to the quality of the drums, to the quality of the mics and what mics do you have. And so I don't have a huge mic locker, but I have a couple of pencil condensers. The Samson CO2s that were $100 for the pair? Those are my pencil condensers. And so I started going down this really deep rabbit hole of learning about mic technique for drum set with limited microphones. Because the whole reason I even wanted to track drums was I was working in collaboration with a friend and a family member here at 52Q's, Michal Sinka. What is good, Michal? And he needed some nuanced jazz style drums. One of the reasons I haven't been tracking drums live, in addition to all of the other reasons I just outlined, it's kind of a pain in the butt and the mics and blah, blah, blah. But if I just need like a boom, bap, rock, then I'll program that. If I need hip hop or something, I will program that. And even like finding like funky drum breaks and stuff, I'll find some loops and chop them up. But jazz, especially like brushes, convincing swing patterns and all that stuff, the nuance is nearly impossible to program. So I thought, you know what? Michal needs jazz drums. We ended up going kind of in a funkier way, but anyway, and I'm going to record. And so I've gone all in, and my favorite ended up being the recorder man technique, which again, There are so many different mic positions with like ORTF and AB and I got a close mic everything. But essentially, I have an SM57 on the snare. I have this RE320 on the kick because the RE320 is kind of the baby brother to the RE20, and RE20, which is a broadcast microphone, makes for a very good kick microphone. As it turns out, this guy also makes for a very good kick mic. And then I have my, $100 overheads, and the recorder man puts a overhead directly down onto the snare drum. And then the right side is pointed at the snare drum, but is just over the shoulder. It's somewhat related to what I've since learned to be called the Glenn Johns technique. Glenn Johns is the engineer that recorded like Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. So that whole big bottom sound was essentially recorded with kick mic, snare mic, overhead mic pointed at the snare, and a second mic just over the floor tom. And so I'm like, wow, that's really great, because if I'm tracking drums for a jazzier sound, then you want that open, more of a live sound as opposed to something that sounds overly close mic'd. So I used the limitations to my advantage, but I admit to kind of getting into the rabbit hole of, ooh, do I need new mics? Should I invest in this? Do I need this? Which kind of leads into this week's topic, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But I really have been really enjoying playing drums again. And I don't think it's any coincidence that my love of playing drums is relational to the amount of gigging I've stopped. Did I say that right? Like, I've enjoyed playing drums now that I'm not having to play drums out on gigs and schlep gear and drive home late. It's not that I was doing a ton of that to begin with. I had already very, very much pared it down. But I'm really excited about having this kit in the studio. It's a nice kit. DW 9000 pedals, all of that stuff, Carope cymbals, and love it. And I feel like I have a fine instrument just behind me. The other drum set was great, but that's a fine instrument, and I am motivated to play it. I'm motivated to learn as much as I can about, all the recording technique within the limitations of my budget, of the gear I have, my skill set, and why I'd want to do it to begin with, which is to record things that I can't easily program. So that's been my week. It's been really, really freeing. I've been enjoying it, and I can't wait to do more of it. I've kind of somewhat set up a permanent type of installation, which means that I've cleaned up the mic cables. Oh man, my sound guys would be so proud of me. I've cleaned up, I've Velcroed, and I've like permanently put the mic stands where I want them. Now, if I need those pencil condensers here on the desktop, I'm going to have to kind of pull them off, but I'm going to leave everything cabled so that I can jump onto it as quickly as need be. Now, as far as the cue itself, we're going to be listening to this a little bit later. It's called Battling Bunnies. And so Michal Sinka did the track and I did the drums, and we're going to be listening to that a little bit later in today's episode. But like I said, this idea of, hey, I need to go buy new drum mics and everything, this feeds directly into this week's topic. And one of this week's topic, which the topic is more inconvenient truths. Now, back in September of 2022, I laid my first round of inconvenient truths, which was, number one, you have to be patient. Number two, you have to be okay with the money, how it flows, and how much you get. Number three, you have to approach this as a business. And number four, you have to be okay with not always writing what you want. Well, I've got some more for you. And This actually came out of a conversation and a comment that I saw that showed up on a video from week 15 of this year on the Parkinson's Law and composers. And Klaatu1 says, do you think using the PreSonus 96 interface can be a reason for amateur productions? Are the AD converters too amateur to get a pro production? Are they too entry level? Will a different interface make that much of a difference or that big of a difference? And that got me really kind of thinking. And the inconvenient truth number one, and who this is inconvenient for might shift, but this is really inconvenient for the equipment manufacturers, the gear sellers, and the plug-in manufacturers, is that it's not the gear that makes you pro. It's not the gear. AD converters and a PreSonus, it doesn't matter. The music matters. Now, can a really nice microphone give you a better recording? Yes. Can it give you a deal-breakingly good recording? Or let me say this another way. Will my Samson CO2 microphones, which were $100 for the pair, so $50 microphone, is the fact that it's a $50 microphone going to be a deal breaker for a library? Is a library going to listen to the drums recorded on that and say, if these are recorded on better mics, then probably we'd sign it. I mean, I'm pushing 800 cues, 800 published cues with libraries, and to date, nobody has ever commented on the fact that I've recorded so much with $50 microphones. It would be nice to have. And I have, an Amazon wish list with Neumanns and everything. So I'd love to have, $2,000 worth of microphones just hanging out over my drum set or attached to my desk here, but I don't. And at this stage, it's not the smartest investment because I need to recoup that investment. And even just this past week, as I'm thinking, well, man, I've got my RE320 for the kick, and it's not really a kick mic, so why don't I just check out Sweetwater or hit Amazon? And I mean, how much is a Beta 52, or how much is like a Lewitt, was it a 640 or whatever? How much is an Audix D2? That's not as cheap as I want it to be, but maybe I need, no, I don't need that. And I confirmed that when I watched a video, multiple videos, where they recorded an entire drum set just with SM57s. I watched one video where a guy took an SM57 on a kick drum and yes, had to do some EQing, had to put compression and gates and transient shapers, but he got an amazing kick sound with an SM57. So can gear help? Yes. But is it the gear that makes something amateur or professional? Absolutely not. It's your skill with the gear. No more than a student trombone is going to make. I'm trying to think of a famous trombonist. Sorry, Nathan. That was a bad instrument choice. Okay, let me start over. No more than a student saxophone in the hands of John Coltrane is going to sound like an amateur performance. Will a $10,000 saxophone sound better than a $200 saxophone? Unquestionably. But it's the performance that makes the difference. And when we're talking about recording, it's what goes into the microphones, what goes into these AD converters that matters much more. And we're not even talking about, and this is my soapbox when it comes to gear, specifically mics and audio boxes, interfaces. Yes, I'd love to have an RME and a U87 or whatever here, but the moment my air conditioning comes on, all that goes out the window, right? The moment traffic goes by on Curry Ford outside of my house, that $800 microphone is now rendered significantly less. Or just I'm not in a room, a treated room that justifies like a U87. If you're going to spend $3,000 on a microphone, that money would be better spent treating a room or on studio monitors or maybe sounds or plugins. But my room cannot take advantage of a $3,000 microphone. It can't take advantage of the advantages that a $3,000 U87 microphone brings to the table. There are so many variables which are going to adversely affect that sound. Does it mean I'll need to do more work after the fact? Yes. Every time I record with my $50 Samsons, I have to clean it up. I have to go in with RX and remove room tone, remove the noise floor. It's an extra step. If I had a Neumann 84, I wouldn't have to do that. They're just significantly less noisy. But you put a cleaned up Samson CO2 next to a raw Neumann, and I am not convinced there is $750 worth of difference. But that's a soapbox for another. My point is, it's not the gear that makes anything sound professional or anything sound amateur. It's the skill with the gear. And to that point, talking about gear, plug-in manufacturers are like the chief of sinners with this. And this coming from somebody who has released a sample pack, right? I get it. I totally get it. But as the time of this recording, I feel like I'm being blitzed, whether it's Output or Native Instruments, or 8DO running these sales, and they're fantastic companies. And I have a ton of love for Native Instruments and 8DO and Trolls and everything. So this isn't about that, but that new plugin that you've been coveting, the thing that's been on your wish list, maybe over at Spitfire, or maybe you had your eyeball on that plugin and just waiting for that summer sale or waiting for the Memorial Day sale or the 4th of July sale or the Labor Day sale, Black Friday, Arbor Day, take your daughter to work day, whatever excuse there is to run a sale. But at the end of the day, that new plugin isn't going to make you a better composer no more than a new mic is going to make you a better performer, a better singer, a better drummer. And the FOMO is such a psychological type of thing that I totally get it. And it's so easy to go there. It's so easy to go there. Like I said, I went there last week with my kick mic. Oh, I need to get, no, you don't. You don't need that new plugin. Especially if you don't know the plugins you have as well as you should. Spend some time doing that. All the time. Okay, I'm telling on myself here. All right, so I'm going to hold up my little hand mirror, Dave. The time you spent researching kick mics, could you have maybe done a better kick performance? The time you spent researching that Omnisphere sample pack, the time you spent watching videos on, is Vital better than Serum, or is Serum better than Phase Plant, or is Phase Plant, the time you spent watching those videos, you could have been studying what you have in your DAW already. Again, hand mirror, this is me talking to myself. Because truth number one, it's not the gear that makes you professional. And that new plugin, that new piece of gear is not going to make you a better composer. All right, so that's number one. Number two, and this is an inconvenient truth that I don't think people are ready to hear, but with the oncoming boulder, Indiana Jones style boulder coming at us that is AI, you're probably going to have to learn how to play an instrument, some kind of instrument. At some point, you should need, or I think you will need to put your hands on an instrument, on a piece of equipment. Now, it could be a guitar, it could be a piano, it could be a hand drum, it could be a Midi controller where you have parameters mapped to all of these things. But if what you're writing can be written 100% in the box with little to no human interaction, then that means AI will probably be able to do it soon. So if you want an advantage over the AI apocalypse, which I don't think it is, I'm using that term somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but if you want an advantage over that, then put your hands on an instrument. Personally, I mean, if I really want to make this inconvenient for everybody, can I have the cone of safety? The cone of safety is something that Shannon and I do, and we pass it on to our students. This basically says that what I'm about to say might sound super harsh, but please know that it's coming from a place of love. But I just need to keep it real with you. In a world of virtual instruments dominated by a keyboard, your piano skills matter. Even if you're a guitarist, even if you are a drummer like me, piano skills matter. And I think you're going to have to get better at piano. Now, you don't have to go all freaking Rachmaninoff, Chopin. You don't have to play concertos. But if you're like a chicken pecking at feed, you're just holding yourself back. At the end of the day, I mean, that's what it's about. I'd say the same thing about typing. I think you should learn how to touch type. I've learned it somewhat, and I'm still improving on it. But if you can type, without then it's undeniable that thoughts from your head can be translated into text if you can type fast. Those thoughts get translated faster. So it stands to reason that if you have even just the most basic rudimentary piano skills, keyboard skills, then you're going to be able to translate ideas from your head into the DAW faster. And the faster you can translate, then the easier it is to stay in the flow state. That's what we're doing here, right? So, if you don't play an instrument right now, and you're wondering what to play, then I think you should pick up piano. There are so many piano tutorials. Just even the most basic piano skills are going to dramatically improve your programming abilities. Because if you're penciling everything in, if you can pencil it in, then so can a robot, so can the AI. But if you can put your hands on an instrument and create a human touch, quite literally, into a programmed, MIDI programmed region and a cue, then that's going to be significantly harder for AI to overtake. I'm not saying it's impossible. And this isn't entirely and only motivated by staying ahead of AI. But I do think that humanization is not only going to become more important as we move forward, living with this new technology, but I also think it's going to be just more valuable to listeners. I think listeners and viewers and music supervisors and editors I think it's going to create an intangible quality which will elevate human created music against artificial created music. And I think that starts with learning to play an instrument. Having some basic piano skills. Because we live in a piano world. We live in a DAW virtual world that is dominated by piano. Sorry, guitarists. Keep playing your guitar by all means, because this is going to feed into number 3 here. But I don't think you can get away with saying, well, I don't play an instrument for much longer. Not to have a professional, sustainable career, because your cues are being put next to people who do play instruments. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions to this. You know, I'm sure for every point I make, there is, well, what about this guy? What about this guy? But I think of it like this. I've heard the argument that, like, well, Hans Zimmer doesn't read music, so I shouldn't have to read music. Well, that supposes that reading music means sitting down and, playing a concerto or playing, a piano sonata or something from Beethoven. That's not what reading music is. Just a way for you to understand the written musical word. And I guarantee you, Hans Zimmer knows the notes on the staff. He understands harmony. He understands progression. He's not going to sit down and sight read Chopin, but he understands music. And not only that, you're not Hans Zimmer. I'm not Hans Zimmer, right? Hans Zimmer has achieved his level of success through a really long path and progression that is, I think we can all admit, rare in the industry. But saying I can't read music and wearing it as a badge of courage, just like saying, well, I don't play piano, I'm just a guitarist or I'm just a drummer, so I don't play piano, and kind of wearing that as a badge of honor, I think it's super misguided. I resisted keyboard skills early on. I just wanted to be a drummer. I was drum set. I wanted to play jazz, funk, rock. I wanted to play drumline and all that stuff. But it really wasn't until I went into my master's, right? And I picked up that instrument, the vibraphone, that I was like, oh, which is insane. Because I was like in my 30s, I think, when I finished my master's, maybe late 20s. And I'm like, oh, this has all been there this whole time. And I don't think it's any coincidence that me pushing back into a keyboard instrument ran alongside, and there was this explosion of my creativity, this explosion of my composing work and my quality as a composer, the more I was able to put my hands on an instrument, the vibraphone. That translates to the piano. My experience, and I know they make like MIDI guitars and all that stuff, and I can respect that. But either way, we're going to need to put our hands on instruments. And if you're just a MIDI composer, and I say just kind of in quotes, but then make sure that if you bring up a synth and you have a MIDI controller that has all the knobs, do the homework, assign the knobs, move things, and create a human interaction within the cue that you're writing, because that's the connection point that we're looking to achieve. Anyway, so that's number 2. You're probably going to have to learn how to play an instrument, and chances are you need to get better at piano. All right, so number 3, leading into that, as we continue to talk more about AI and all of that kind of stuff, but even beyond that, we talked about all these plug-in sales and everything. By now, so many of us have all the same tools, right? I mean, we all have damage. We all have like Gravity or Omnisphere or Zebra or Serum. We all have this string library or that string library. But at the end of the day, the sounds are all kind of starting to sound homogeneous. And so if we're all using the same tools, then the only thing that separates one person's cue from another person's cue is, I guess, how good they are with it. But even like YouTube channels like mine and others, you can learn. What's happening, I feel, is that everything's kind of getting samey. You know? Everything has, or let's say it has the real danger of all being super homogenized. It's good for milk, bad for art, with a lowercase a. So what does that mean for us? Well, I think moving forward, composers who create their own sounds, whether it's through recording, whether it's through sound design, making their own custom patches, I think they will have an advantage. If you enjoy like digging into Serum and making your own patches, then I think you're going to have an advantage. This is one of the reasons I've started doing this, is in recognition that there's this whole part of the composing process that I've never really pushed into. Partly, and if I'm being honest, is I was super intimidated by it. I didn't understand it. It felt kind of mathy. You know, I'm like, me, drummer, hit things, right? Caveman. But synths just mystified me. But I got tired of feeling that way. Right? I be in a Zoom room with folks chatting, and they're talking all this synth talk, and I'm just like, yeah. You said oscillator. I know what that is. But there's this whole side of the industry, this whole side of producing music that I was willfully ignoring based out of ignorance and fear and intimidation. And I decided to not be okay with that anymore. And so I started putting in the time, just a little bit at a time. You know, laptop sitting, you know, we're watching TV and I've got some headphones on and I'm tweaking Serum, watching an ungodly amount of YouTube tutorials. Shout out to John Audio, his YouTube channel. You know, we've had him on the podcast before, but yeah, his YouTube channel is great. And finding a tool which resonates with you. For me, it was Omnisphere and now Serum. Like, I really get Serum. It just clicks for me. And not looking for the next best thing, but starting with what you have. And I already had the Serum license. I already had it. So instead of like, oh, these people are talking about phase plant, I didn't go get phase plant. Full transparency, I did buy Pigments because they were running a sale. And then they were running a loyalty sale. They got me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm weak. Yeah, so it's like, you can get Pigments 5 for $69. I'd be stupid not to, right? See, Dave. Let me talk to Mirror Dave. Dave. Come on, man. Anyway. Oh, yep. I'm just like you. I'm just a future version of you, man. I succumb to the FOMO and so, but even still, you know, Pigment still eludes me a little bit, but having dug into Serum, and part of digging into Serum was realizing that I'm going to need to make my own sounds. It's one of the reasons I record something on nearly every track. It might be a shaker. It might be a jaw harp. It might be a full drum set. It might be that vibraphone. Just wait until I throw some mics over that vibraphone. But recording something, making your own patches, bringing something into a synth and creating your own sound designed patch, which sounds like nothing else on the planet. One of the things that I've started doing in regards to Serum, was watching tutorials where they make a patch, and I will follow along with them, and I'll make the patch right as they do. And then, well, first of all, inevitably my patch sounds a little bit different just because, I'm not like following numbers. I'm just kind of, okay, he's tweaking this and this LFO. So it sounds a little bit different. And then I will iterate from that patch. So I will change the wavetable or change the LFO timing or change the tempo, and it creates a wildly different patch. That's been my process, and I've loved that. Even starting with patches, I'm like, I don't need some kind of festival lead sound that might sound great, or a big wobble bass for dubstep. I don't, but let me learn how to make that, because I am learning techniques that I can apply to the tension cues that I want to write, to those dark kind of ominous tasking not ominous tasking, but ominous, tasking, investigation type cues, which I'm really, really interested in writing. But the truth is, the inconvenient truth is, those composers who do put the time to create their own sounds, again, whether recorded, whether sound design, whether custom patches in a synth, I think they're going to have an advantage moving forward. So that's number 3. Number 4, the fourth inconvenient truth, and this will be inconvenient for those of us who make music for shows that really we might not either be the target demographic, we might not enjoy it, but in order to be the best at writing the kind of cues that you want to write, you need to watch a lot of the TV that features the type of cues you want to write. I don't think it's a coincidence that I have found personally a lot of success writing sports cues specifically for football, because I am an avid consumer of football and was long before I was writing production and library music. I love football. I had an intrinsic understanding, just even on just a kind of a gut level, of what does and doesn't work for sports broadcasting, specifically the NFL. I don't think that's a coincidence. Which means, if you want to write plucky dramedy music, you should probably watch the shows that feature it. And I don't mean just reference it. I mean really watch multiple episodes. Well, let me say this another way. Let's say composer A and composer B have the same skill set. Let's say composer A and composer B are writing dramedy for Temptation Island, or Shannon and I have been watching The Goat on Amazon Prime with Daniel Tosh. It's kind of parroting, yet not reality. Anyway, we don't watch a ton of reality TV. So let's say a cooking show. Composer A has never watched an episode of a cooking show before. Composer B watches cooking shows all the time. Understands the flow of the shows, understands the type of cues that they are used. Who do you think is going to have an advantage? Now, it's not that you can't have a career writing cues for shows you've never watched. I think you can. I had never seen an episode of Temptation Island before I made air on it. And to this day, I've never seen an episode of Louisiana Law, even though my cues are on there. I've had cues placed on Dr. Pimple Popper before. That show is as advertised. It's right there in the name. That is a disgusting show that I physically cannot stomach. When I first got placed, I was like, hey man, I'm going to pull this clip and I'm going to put it in my reel on my website. And nope. Yeah, that show is exactly what it. And they're not just pimples either. I mean, they're using the word pimple kind of loosely there. Oh, that made my mouth water. Just like in a kind of, I'm going to be sick kind of way. Anyway, moving on. You can have a career writing music for shows that you've never seen. But composers who are writing shows for shows they know and shows that they have spent time watching and understanding, I think are going to have a distinct advantage. Yep. And that's inconvenient because some of the shows that we write for, just we might not like. We might not be the target demographic for it. Maybe it doesn't come on in your country. I have one student who made air on the NFL and he lives in India. I'm not sure he's ever seen an American football game before. And if he has, he sure as heck isn't watching it live. But somebody who is steeped in it, who has lived it and consumed it, I think they're going to have an advantage. And so if you want that advantage, and in the increasingly homogenized industry, whether through how free information is, how much of an industry secret production music isn't anymore, thank you, COVID, how the tools are all much cheaper to get, computers are much more powerful and can handle very, very convincing sample libraries and synths. So if we're looking for a way to separate ourselves from everybody else who has all the same tools and are writing all the same pitches to all the same libraries, then if you know the shows intimately that you're pitching to, then you are absolutely going to have an advantage. That's what so many of these truths are about how do you create separation from the pack. Notice I'm not saying go find your sound or anything like, no, that feels a little too artistically heavy. You know what I mean? But instead, how can we distance ourselves from the competition? How can we create a sense of uniqueness in an industry which isn't necessarily looking for originality? Let me say that again. How can we reinforce our own compositional and artistic uniqueness in an industry which isn't as concerned with originality? You kind of following me there? Because original and unique, I believe, are two separate things. It's probably a whole separate podcast episode by itself. But like, how many cooking shows do we need? How many dating shows do we need? There is expectations that music supervisors and editors and audiences bring to the table. If you watch a cooking show that has a little clock in the right-hand corner and there's only 30 seconds left and things are on fire, you could close your eyes right now and picture the scene and probably imagine the type of music. Right? Bum 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 bum, right? And the reason is because we culturally expect that. So if an editor is looking, if an editor is editing a scene that is a countdown scene, they're looking for countdown cues, and all countdown cues kind of sound samey. And that's what I'm saying. There's nothing original about a countdown type of a cue. But what makes this cue unique from this cue to the point where an editor would pick it over this other one? So whether it's believability in your performance because you're putting your hand on an instrument, whether it's creating your own sounds by recording things, making your own patches that they haven't heard before and yet still sits in the pocket of what they need, on top of a composer who has watched a lot of cooking shows with the countdown in the corner. It's about creating separation. Because competition is only getting steeper. The tools are only getting cheaper. The tools are only getting more accessible. Which means we going to have to work harder, which brings me to point number 5. And Christian Henson recently released a video which rang so true that I actually want to play a clip of it right here.
Which is why I think we're in a bit of a pickle, because we know we've been making library music, royalty-free stuff with the arpeggiators and these amazing pads that evolve and do all of these extraordinary things, or clever sample libraries that do stuff where you can just hold down a chord and do nothing. We've been doing this for long enough. I think what we're really scared of is the potential for there to be a need for us to work a bit harder, for us to go back to what music is really about, which is a communal activity about playing together. The return, I hope, of virtuosity.
The return of virtuosity. Man, when I heard that, I felt ashamed, to be honest. I felt kind of ashamed of myself. Because I feel like in the pursuit of the artisan composer, which I've talked about that before. Is this art? No, I'm an artisan. But in the pursuit of that, had I accepted mediocrity in the name of output, in the name of quantity, I think I did. I think I have. I think I've been thinking about it maybe a little backwards. Maybe I've been putting such a high premium on output, and I've been working so hard to make this not art with a capital A, which I still believe in. I've been working so hard at it that I went from an artisan approach, the farmer's market artisan, come buy my bread. I've worked really hard at it and all of that. And I think I went from to artisan, but from artisan to kind of assembly line. And I think that's dangerous. And for my role in that, in pushing that concept out to the world, I feel I owe art an apology. Because I have found myself phoning it in sometimes. And I'm here to say that I'm committed to not doing that anymore. How can I get from assembly line back to artisan? And that means that I'm going to have to work harder. We are going to have to work harder. The tools are only getting easier to use. More people are coming into the production sync music world. How do we create separation? Well, it's not by assembly line. That's how we got fast food. I mean, if in the chef, I'm not interested in being McDonald's, and I love McDonald's. I mean, I'm not interested in being a 4-star restaurant either, or is it 5 stars? Whatever the most stars. I'm not interested in that. That feels way too much pressure and weight and blah. No. My name on the marquee. Nope. But just because I don't want to be a Michelin star restaurant doesn't mean I need to be okay with being Burger King. I need to be better. You need to be better. We need to be better. We need to embrace virtuosity, not treat it like a badge of honor because look how many cues we cranked out this week. If they're all great, then awesome. But if you're just like, bum, 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 here comes another cue, pull the lever down the line, no, I am committing to stopping that mentality. So maybe next week's episode is, okay, Dave, but you still need like 100 cues a year, or at least one cue away. How do you do that? Well, I'll let you know if I figure that out. That's what we're going to do here together, friends, is we're going to figure that out. So, what do you think? Did these inconvenient truths ring with you? That one, the gear is not what makes you pro, and that new plugin isn't going to make you a better composer. Number two, you're probably going to have to learn to play an instrument, and you're probably going to have to get better at piano. Number three, composers who make their own sounds, whether recording, sound design, custom patches, will have a distinct advantage over those who just use presets. Number four, composers who consume a lot of the television that features the type of cues they write have an advantage over those who don't. And number five, that we need to return to virtuosity and that we are going to have to work harder as this industry grows and more people are hip to what we're doing here. But what do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments below. I do read all of those and I appreciate all of those comments. All right, so we are going to take a quick break. I'm going to bring you a few words on how you can join 52 Cues and support the community. And when we come back, we're going to be taking a listen to Battling Bunnies, which is a cue written by Michal Sinka and featuring me on a live drum set. Stick around, we'll be right back. Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel, would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52 Cues, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52 Cues. You can just go to 52cues.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52cues.com. So that was Battling Bunnies from Michal Sinka, featuring yours truly on drums and percussion. I really enjoyed doing that. And even, I don't know if it's a latent trauma from early in my drumming career. I get a little anxious anytime I hear recording of me playing drums. My voice, no problem. Shakers, hand drums, all that stuff, I have zero problems with. Anything programmed, MIDI, but for whatever reason, I get that little fluttery anxiety anytime I hear myself recorded on drum set. Anyway, I thought it turned out really, really well. And I gave him a lot of different mic positions, and I gave him the like 16 or 18 different takes. And so for you family and friends subscribers, I have a complete breakdown of that coming up this week, coming up tomorrow here on the 52 Qs community. But that is going to do it for me this week. You definitely want to tune in next week, where we are running the interview that we did, or I guess it's more of a roundtable that we did at the 52 Qs family reunion, where we had several folks from the family community come into Orlando. They spent like 3 days here in Orlando, and we had a day at Full Sail. We had several days at my place, and I cooked for them and went to some of my favorite restaurants. We had one of my publishers come in and spend the afternoon with us, took us all out to lunch. And so we sat down and we recorded a live podcast episode, and the topic was production music is a team sport, talking about the importance of community in what can be a really isolating type of a career. So you want to tune in next week. That's what's coming up. And by the way, if you want to be notified of whenever I put out new episodes, be sure to subscribe to the channel or follow in your podcast app. And while you're at it, go ahead and give it that thumbs up, and that 5-star review. I know all of the YouTubers and podcasters say that, but it really does help folks find us. And finally, again, a huge word of thanks to our family, friends, and neighbor subscribers who pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. Thank you so much. Just know that I love and appreciate you. And whether you are a subscriber or not, know that I love and appreciate you. Again, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had a fantastic week, and I know that you're going to have an amazing week coming up. How do I know that? Because I trust and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52 Qs podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52 Qs, head over to 52qs.com.